Now, in this time slot, I've always felt it's important to give my own unique views, not just to repeat everything that's been going on all day. Otherwise, why listen? Why put aside everything that you're doing and listening to this program? This actually has to be appointment radio. 3 p.m. on the West Coast, 6 p.m. on the East Coast. People have a lot of things to do. And so I give you my thoughts. You may not always agree with them. Many of you do agree with them. And I watched last night's debate after the program, and I watched the first hour, going back to it, which was aired during the last hour of my program. And you know what? I watched last night's debate not so much to hear what the candidates had to say in particular, because I think by now we know who they are. No, I watched it to see if this tag team that I've been talking about for the last many weeks and emphasized the last 2 days, this tag team tactic with Mitt Romney and Ron Paul would occur again. And wouldn't you know, like clockwork, as in the case of Michelle Bachmann and Rick Perry and Newt Gingrich and Al Santorum, Ron Paul attacks the conservative who most threatens Romney, Mitt Romney attacks that same conservative, and Paul and Romney say nothing of each other's records and statements. And so it is that the conservative who's targeted is then said to look defensive, intemperate, unprepared, and the debate's loser. And yet the conservative who's targeted really has three only options in that format: to just sit there and smile stupidly, to actually defend him or herself from the attacks, and or go on the offensive against both of his or her accusers, and then be said to be defensive and intemperate. That's been the game. The problem is that that tag team attack makes it difficult for the targeted conservative to get their message out. Their records are cherry-picked, and they're hit with these attacks repeatedly. So many that the format, oh, you have 30 seconds to respond, doesn't allow an adequate response under any of the circumstances. It appears that even the Washington Compost figured this out, because around 10:30, 30 minutes after the debate, they had a blog post which said, look at that, they're tag teaming. MSLSD has now figured it out. Now, there are a couple of things I want to do today for those of you who remain really curious about all this, why it's occurring, and whether you approve of it. Now, for the most part, what has been said since last night is that Romney was steady and benefited most from the debate. Santorum was defensive and lost ground. Newt did the best, but he's not that relevant anymore. I'm saying this is what the common wisdom of today is. And Ron Paul was having a grand old time. This is pretty much what's been going on all day in terms of what the commentators are saying. I actually believe Newt did the best because he wasn't the target, and that allowed him to shine. Romney did not do as well as is being spun by the establishment. Santorum did not do as badly as is being spun by the establishment, and Ron Paul has been the key attack dog from the start, the attack dog with the mission to kneecap any conservative, challenge their conservative credentials, and so now he's the guy who sits there and claims to have the standard for conservatives in public office, and if they don't measure up to his standard, they're not conservatives. A man who 20 years ago rejected Reagan and the Republican Party, ran for president as a libertarian, and trashed conservatism. He's now the guy who gets to measure everybody else, which benefits Romney, because he won't take Romney's measure. So let me underscore that, in fact, there is this Paul-Romney coordination, which means the most establishment-oriented of the candidates and the most anarchistic libertarian of the candidates have joined forces. I'm very curious to know what you Romney supporters and Paul supporters think about this. Particularly you Ron Paul supporters. Is this not a sellout, or is this perfectly fine by you? And doesn't it also mean that Ron Paul really has no intention of winning or doesn't think he can win? Because he's Romney's wingman in these debates? Maybe he just seeks a prominent role for him or his son at the convention, or as we talked about yesterday from that article out of Kentucky, maybe he's hoping, or Romney's waving in front of his nose, the possibility of Rand Paul maybe as a VP candidate or in the cabinet, or who knows what. I'm just curious to know also whether this debate has influenced any of you in your decisions. Did anything really happen here that makes a difference? I know the media want it to make a difference. I know what the media want. I know what the Republican establishment wants. I want to know from you, however, if it affected you in some significant way that you're going to change your mind. Now, from yesterday's show, I rarely do this, but I need it to set the stage. From yesterday's show, cut one, go. I've been talking the last few weeks about this curious partnership, or allegiance, or alliance, or whatever you want to call it, between Mitt Romney and Ron Paul, who I don't think could be further apart. And Ron Paul has basically been Mitt Romney's wingman, and what he's done is he's spent a fortune attacking one conservative after another. Bachmann, with ads saying she's no conservative. Perry, he's no conservative. Gingrich, he's no conservative. Santorum, he's no conservative. This coming from a libertarian, of course. But that said, no such ads against Romney. Romney, who's been pretty much the front runner from the beginning, even though he's had some bumps in the roads, including most recently. So why? So why, I asked. Here's cut two from yesterday's show. Go. The point is, you notice how he will not even politely criticize Romney. And I've been asking myself, what is this? What, so he can get a speaking part at the convention? What is being offered? Maybe nothing, but maybe he's hoping something. Many people today have sent me a link to a national public radio affiliate in Kentucky, WFPL, and a piece by Kenny Colston. And it reads as follows, and maybe this is it. Kentucky's junior senator says it would be an honor to be considered as a possible running mate for Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney. By the way, I think Rand Paul would be a good vice president. But that's, again, beside the point. This may be something that Ron Paul is hoping for, that he believes Romney will be the nominee, and he would like his son to be the vice presidential nominee. And so he's not attacking Romney. And by the way, I'm live now. I have no idea if that's the case. None. That was in an article the other day. And then Stephen Hayes on Fox News this week, hat tip right scoop. He has even more information. Cut 4, go.
There is a de facto alliance between Ron Paul and Mitt Romney. There's no question about it. At this point, it's an open partnership. I mean, Jesse Benton, Ron Paul's campaign manager, has talked about the extent to which they're cooperating with the Romney campaign. He said that there are weekly phone calls.
Okay,
they have good relations.
Where's the reason?
Because if Mitt Romney, if this in fact goes as long as I think it will go, goes through June, maybe to the convention, and Mitt Romney is short delegates, let's say he doesn't get to 1144, Ron Paul will be steadily accumulating delegates in caucus states and elsewhere that may be enough eventually to put Romney over the top, or to have some kind of an impact, or at least to give Ron Paul a speaking spot at the convention.
So now it's out in the open for everybody to see. And it's been going on for months. It's been going on since this summer. Since this summer. But it's even more than what Stephen Hayes says. It's even more than what I've speculated myself. And when we come back, I'll explain. When we come back in just a few minutes.
Levin.
Now, folks, I'm going to walk through this as I have been step by step by step, as a good litigator would. And I'm going to go through this. And one of the things that saddens me, and it really does, is how weak the conservative intellectual bench has become and how gutless it has become. Folks like to throw around William F. Buckley Jr.'s name, but Buckley had courage, in addition to being brilliant. And so much of that courage is missing today. So I want to take you through a few steps here to begin with, and we'll have the break at the bottom of the hour, and we will continue it. Conservatism, generally speaking, and this more radical form of libertarianism, and it's not mainstream traditional libertarianism, radical libertarianism, have always been at dagger points. Now, they've had alliances from time to time, but more dagger points than alliances. One of the mentors to Ron Paul, who he considered one of the greats, was an economist by the name of Murray Rothbard. You can Google this. As a matter of fact, we're going to link to this article in the American Thinker from last year. Murray Rothbard was an anarchist, pretty much. He was a radical libertarian, and a lot of libertarians rejected him. But Ron Paul embraced him, as did Ron Paul's chief of staff, Lew Rockwell, as do many others who surround Ron Paul. And the vile newsletters that you hear about all the time and so forth, those were also influenced by Rothbard and Rockwell and so forth, and reviewed by Ron Paul before they were released. So who's Murray Rothbard? He's treated like a saint among the anarchist libertarian wing. Like a saint. And